Slay the Dragon is a low-prep, old-school RPG designed for game masters who want a fast-paced experience. It's D20-based, dungeon-focused, and simple to adapt to your style. Creating characters takes only a few minutes, so you're ready to dive in right away. No hours spent on prep. Just grab your dice, set the scene, and go. Jump in, make it your own, and start playing immediately. Slay the Dragon, back now on Kickstarter.
Imagine if your dungeon master didn't allow you to use the player's handbook. If you're a game master, imagine you said to your players, we're going to start a new campaign, but you're not allowed to use the player's handbook at all. Only I'm allowed to read it. What would they do? Would they go along with it? Would they rage quit your game? Could you actually have more fun with role-playing games if you didn't know the rules? Stick with me. That's the topic on today's Dungeon Craft. Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor DM, and this channel is about all things tabletop role-playing games. And if that's what you're into, Deathbringer, tell them what they should do.
Like, subscribe, bell, comment, newsletter, Patreon.
So I'm reading this book, The Elusive Shift by John Peterson. It's about how role-playing games forged their identity. Back in the 1970s and 80s, when they first came out, people struggled to describe what they were and how to play them. The term role-playing game did not emerge for several years. If you don't know who John Peterson is, he is the historian who wrote Playing at the World, the comprehensive history of role-playing games, as well as The Game Master, which deals with the feud between creators Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and all his books are great. And I'm thinking a lot about this passage I found on page 41, and now I'm about to do something that you really shouldn't do on YouTube if you want to retain viewers, which is read a page from a book. But what the hell, I'm going to do it anyway. So, setup. Dungeons & Dragons first appeared at conventions, gradually made its way to college campuses, and eventually made its way to Cambridge. There it was discovered by student Sandy Eisen, who wrote, "I found the first few games of Dungeons & Dragons intensely enjoyable and exciting. I really lived the part, and my willing suspension of disbelief, I found myself there, in the dungeon. My actions, and of course my thoughts about these actions, were dictated by real-life considerations, and no thought to wargame mechanics entered my head to distract me from the events going on." But for Eisen, eventually learning the game system became a source of acute disappointment. Inevitably, when you are aware of the rules, you play out each situation with an eye toward obtaining the best odds or chances for survival, etc., considering the rules rather than the situation you are in. To avoid this, I have decided that when I design and run my own dungeon, I will not permit my players to discover the rules. Of course, this will put them at a great disadvantage, and I feel I may have to put over quite a bit of information in the form of legend, folklore, and tales so that they will have some idea of what they are up against and what to try, but all without disclosing the game mechanics. And Eisen wasn't the only one who felt this way. I've heard of game masters back in the 70s who wouldn't allow their players to have their character sheets. They could roll up the character, but as soon as the game began, the game master took the character sheets and kept track of the player's hit points and equipment themselves. Other game masters kept the character's armor class and even hit points secret, and they would describe the results of the combat. Like you were just slightly grazed, or you're really bleeding out, you're barely able to stand up. And the players would have to make their decisions based on that. And it sounds crazy. I remember reading about it back in the 80s, and I thought, wow, that's just nuts. But now I understand why a game master would do that. It's because once you know the mechanics, it hurts the immersion. Dungeons & Dragons is a game about magic, but a lot of the magic of the game is lost once you learn the rules. At least that's been my experience. This is the first version of Dungeons & Dragons I played with back in 1980, 1981. And I became the game master because my friends were just too lazy to read the rules. So I never had that initial Dungeons & Dragons experience where I really didn't know what was going on. But my friends loved the game, and that was a blessing and a curse, because on one hand I had players to play with, but on the other hand, they all bought the game too, and then they read it. I got the player's handbook, they got the player's handbook. I got the DM's guide and monster manual, they got the DM's guide and monster manual, even though they weren't the game master. But after a while, they knew the strengths and the weaknesses of the monsters. I would throw a troll at them and they would say, we gotta use a torch, we gotta burn it. Trolls regenerate unless you use fire on them. And that's when the game, to me, lost a lot of its magic and devolved into a lot of numbers crunching and arguing about rules. Most of the people I played games with in intermediate school stopped playing Dungeons & Dragons, but my enthusiasm continued, and I cultivated a group of like-minded individuals, and we eventually tried out other role-playing games. I never had that first player experience until I played Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay in the late 80s. My friend Raphael bought a copy, and he wanted to game master it for us. And the game was super expensive, so we could only afford one copy. And I understood the basic mechanics well enough. It was like Call of Cthulhu, percentile, roll under to hit. But I wasn't sure how the critical hit charts worked. And they scared me because they were really gory. You didn't just drop to 0 hit points. Your pelvis got smashed, or a carotid artery was severed and you got hit with an arterial spray. I remember the first session we were exploring a sewer and we encountered a demon, and I remember being so terrified that I ran away. Not because I failed some sort of fear check, because I was actually afraid my character was going to die. That excitement, that thrilling feeling of not knowing where the parameters are, is one of the reasons I actually enjoy playing role-playing games. I always say, if you want to introduce me to a new game, just have me sit down at your table and I'll play the game. Don't explain to me the character sheet, we'll work it out as we play. When I run Dungeons & Dragons for the first time for students, I always start them with fully equipped characters at the entrance to Cave A of the Caves of Chaos. It's the Kobold lair. Then I say, you're at the entrance to the cave. Who's going to be the first to step in? And I describe the kobolds as pit bulls walking on their hind legs, wielding spears. And I have had groups of players who just ran in fear, or the kobolds growled at them and they backed out of the room. They were terrified. They don't know that you could just punt a kobold and kill them. That's one of the reasons I love running games for young people, because they don't know the rules, so all the sessions are super exciting. When players use language like they're going to build a character or optimize a character, that's metagaming. That's trying to exploit the rules to get a character that is resilient and as powerful as possible. And if you enjoy playing role-playing games like that, that's fine. It's approaching D&D as if it were a strategy game. Lots of people play that way and enjoy it, but I generally don't think that tactics and combat is where D&D is the best. If I wanted to play a tactical combat game, I would play Kingdom Death, which I think has more fun mechanics. The reason I play Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games is not because of mechanics, it's because of the immersion. I want to feel like I'm really there. When I'm playing a game, one of the things that really takes me out of the moment is when the game master describes this great lead-up and this terrifying monster and then says, okay, everyone roll for initiative. And we sit for like 5 minutes trying to figure out just who goes first. And this has really informed how I introduce new players to the game. I've heard of groups that will invite you to watch for a couple of sessions before they'll actually let you play. But I don't do that. I always say, yeah, you never played? That's fine. Come in, sit at the table. And I'll give the player a simplified character sheet. Just their ability scores, no 3 to 18, just the bonus, their hit points, and their armor class. And I'll say, if you want to kill something, tell me, I'll tell you what you need to roll. I recently went to see the 20-Sided Tavern. It's a D&D show in New York. I had a great time, and it struck me that they did a great job of introducing an audience who was unfamiliar with D&D with the concepts of the game. Their character sheet looked just like mine. The 6 ability bonuses, or penalties, armor class, hit points, that's it. You came in not knowing how to play D&D, but everyone who walked out had a pretty good idea of how the game was going to be played. Teachers call that scaffolding. The idea that you introduce a new concept in a simplified form, and once players are familiar with the basics of the game, then you can add more details. But if you're an experienced player, how do you get that love back? Well, the answer is play different games. Every once in a while, you should break out a new game. Just play it for a session. I recommend starter sets. I've reviewed the starter sets for Blade Runner and Dragonbane, and they're terrific. They really have everything you need to play the game for months, and they allow you to try out a game and see if you like it. And you might be able to get that excitement back. Your other option is to get back to basics and go minimalist. Check out this version of the game. Or you can get my own game, Deathbringer, at DriveThruRPG. Mostly the same mechanics as the world's most popular role-playing game, but all of the rules fit in this trifold. You even get a character sheet. In my own experience with my long-running campaign, I've discovered that the fewer rules we use, the more fun we have. But that's just me. What do you think? Share in the comments below. Also below, you'll find links to Jon Peterson's The Elusive Shift, the Deathbringer starter rules on DriveThruRPG, Dungeon Craft Patreon, where you can get tons of bonus content, and the Deathbringer newsletter. And if you want more DM advice, check out these videos I'll see you soon. May all your rolls be 20s.